what is a white film evaporator anyway, and why do you use it? Well, a white film evaporator is used to make distillate. You know, that beautiful golden yellow CBD clear distillate that everybody loves? Yeah, that's what they use. It's called a white film evaporator. It's also called a white film distillation equipment, or CBD distiller, or that machine over there in the corner that makes the awesome CBD distillate, also known as that. So what is the process for making CBD distillate? Well, you need to start with good process and good quality hemp. Hemp without seeds, for example, or hemp devoid of sticks and stems, those will give you the best quality hemp CBD distillate. Once you have that hemp, you can grind it up, you extract it using CO2 extraction, you de-wax it, take all the waxes out of it via a winterization process, and remove solvents to optionally decarboxylate. Then it goes into your distillation machine to make beautiful, clear CBD distillate. So where are white film evaporators used in hemp extraction? Well, they're used smack dab in the middle of the entire process. This chart shows the process for basically creating end products for hemp. This is the hemp processing workflow. And you can see you get in your materials in receiving, you move them into quarantine, you do all your testing, quality releases them from quarantine, they start to dry, they're all ground up, then they decarboxylate, you extract, you take all the waxes out, and then you're into distillation. You can see downstream, a lot of people use distillate for isolate production. They also use it for broad spectrum distillate production. Broad spectrum typically is made with a chromatography piece of equipment. I'm not going to go into that now, but suffice it to say that distillate is really a key aspect to your operation because it will help you make products. A lot of distillate products are used directly in formulations, and then they're also used as feedstocks for downstream processes such as isolate and broad spectrum. So you may ask, how do I distill and what's the process for distilling CBD? This is a chart here that shows the process of what's happening inside of that white film evaporator. You can see that the oil heated coming in, winterized, it's then being wiped on a wall. These are wipers here, and you can see this thing is spinning around. When it spins around, it produces a very thin film on the heater wall. You can see there's a heater here, and as it gets hot, the thinner it is, the quicker it will get hot. It starts to evaporate. And you can see, depending on how hot it is, stuff will start to evaporate off. It gets into this space here, and it floats. There's what they call chemical potential, and it floats over there. And it hits this condenser. The condenser is colder than this heater, and so it will condense this gas back into a liquid. So that's the process of what's happening inside of the white film evaporator. Again, preheated CBD and terpenes oil enter the still. The wiper blade scrapes the oil onto the evaporator to make a thin film right here. Terpenes boil off, but they don't condense on the condenser. So the terpenes end up typically in the vacuum system, and the CBD boils off and condenses on the condenser. Those components of the oil that do not boil stay on the wall and are pushed down. That's called the residual. So how potent is distillate produced by the white film evaporator? Typically, a white film evaporator can produce 75 to 85% CBD. It can be produced by a white film, and THC can actually reach up to 90% potency. Residual waxes, fats, terpenes, chlorophyll, plants, they are separated out and separated into a different stream. Terpenes that do not condense on the condenser will be caught in the cold trap, and terpenes from a white film, they're just not very desirable in terms of flavor and aroma. You got to realize that with CBD, any potency over 50% will basically crystallize. So you may start off with a beautiful looking golden clear oil. You set it down, let it cool, and it'll crystallize out. You won't be able to see through it. So that's one thing associated with upgrading the potency of CBD oils. So how does a white film distillation work? Well, you can see here is a plot of all these different solvents and different cannabinoids and also different terpenes. And they're all ranked by boiling point. You can see that as the vacuum increases, these boiling points actually go down in terms of the temperature that they'll boil at. But what's more important is just the relative boiling points. Like, for example, ethanol versus THC. It would be very, very easy to, for example, flash off and separate acetone from THC using white film distillation. You would just basically set the wall or the heater at 100 degrees, and the THC would be in what's called the residue, and all of this stuff would be condensed on the condenser in the short path. So that's how it works. If you set your temperature anywhere, you can move this line, and the condensate or the recovered solvent will be on the condenser, and all this stuff will be in the recovered oil, which is called the residual. So how many white film evaporators are needed for hemp extraction operation? Well, that's something you need to think about as you're scaling up. If you're starting out with a 1-ton facility, our white film evaporator distillation, you need approximately one of those. It's a dual still, and we call it the clear still. It's a dual still white film evaporator. Basically, as you increase the number of tonnage, you're going to have to increase the number of distillation units. But it's pretty simple. You do 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1. Now, if your potency of your input material is really high, 10 or 15%, you're probably going to be creating more crude oil, and you're also going to need more white film distillation units. So depending on your input potency, you're going to need to think about, okay, maybe you need to add 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's some assumptions there on how good your input material is in order to get a good number. So why are wiped film evaporators more scalable than short path distillation units? Well, this plot kind of shows that. You can see here you have tons of biomass processed per day. This is the number of white film units that you'd have to have. And here's the number of short path, 10-liter short path distillation units you'd have to have. Short path distillation is also another way to get and separate out, so for example, cannabinoids from the rest of the residue. It really produces a beautiful oil. It produces beautiful potent oil, but it's not very scalable, as you can see here. And it's also not very consistent. The white film distillation unit, the white film evaporators are pretty consistent. That's because you're always processing under the same conditions every time, and it's not a fractional distillation unit. I'm not going to go into all the details here on this. You can read our blogs, and you can also see some of the other videos that we produced, but that will help you understand the difference between short path distillation and white film.